For Body Chemistry Associates and Health Connection Radio, I'm your host, Jay Foster. Well, one of our last podcasts was on mistletoe and progesterone. Talked a lot about progesterone that time, so I thought I would talk about the estrogens this time. Estrogen is not really a term. It's the estrogens that make up a class of chemicals that all have this type of estrogenic activity. Now, the estrogens could be described as the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I'll describe those for you. The good, and I'll explain each one, the good are the phytoestrogens, like from plants, like from soy. Non-GMO soy contains healthy estrogens. The bad would be the drug estrogens, like Premarin and Prempro. And we'll talk about pregnant mare's urine and where they get those estrogens in Premarin. And then we'll talk about the ugly ones, which are the xenoestrogens, X-E-N-O, xenoestrogens, which are the worst ones that cause most of the problems in our society and in certain cancers. So let's talk about the estrogens in general. They all fit in, all these chemicals, the good, the bad, and the ugly, fit in to estrogen receptors on the cell. And so it's like a hand and glove fit. They all fit into the same receptor. So any one of these class of estrogens fits in and starts some kind of metabolic activity in the cell. Now, you want to saturate your system with the least likely to stimulate estrogen receptors and least likely to influence that type of metabolism in the cell, and avoid the ones that are the most estrogen receptor stimulators. Well, the good news is the good estrogens are the plant estrogens, like phytoestrogens from non-genetically modified soy. So, since they are the weakest estrogen receptor stimulators, if you saturate your system with those estrogens, you block out, they all fit in the same receptor sites, you block out the bad and the ugly ones. So, soy is good, not bad. Just because it has phytoestrogens, everybody's worried about the word estrogen. You got to really understand that those are the weakest and safest estrogens to take in your system, and they block all the stronger ones out, including human estrogens, which are in the next class, but those are good unless they're too much, and then they're bad, or not metabolized well. And then the bad ones are the drug estrogens, like Premarin is much stronger than the good phytoestrogens. It stimulates the estrogen receptors much, much stronger even than your human estrogens. And Premarin, which was given to most women, said they had to take it so that they didn't have osteoporosis, did nothing really for osteoporosis, and also did increase the risk of certain cancers like breast cancers and ovarian cancer. So Premarin, where they got that word, was pregnant mare's urine. So they get these horses pregnant, and I had a guest on my show at one time years ago about how horrible Merck was torturing these poor horses to get their Premarin out. But they would get them pregnant on and on and on and on and on, and then they would extract their urine and get a bunch of different horse estrogens out. It's called mixed equine for horse. Mixed equine estrogens. They are not human estrogens. And I wonder how much they would have sold if the doctor had told the female patients, oh, by the way, we're going to give you horse estrogens. I think that might have had a bad effect. So horse estrogens and human estrogens are different. They're specific to the animal they come from. And we have human estrogens, bioidentical estrogens are fine. But horse estrogens are not, and they led to an increase in certain cancers. So those are much, much stronger than the good phytoestrogens, much stronger than your human estrogens at stimulating these estrogen receptors and probably being a causative factor in hormone-related cancers like breast cancer. And then we come to the ugly. And the ugly are the xenoestrogens. That's Xeno, says foreign estrogens. They're like chemicals. They used to be in water bottles, plastic water bottles. They finally took them out of the plastic water bottles. And the same chemical used to be in Visa receipts or grocery store receipts or anything you get out of the machine, used to have the same highly estrogenic chemical that was in plastic bottles and plastics and things like that. So when they took what they said was the bad estrogen out of the Visa receipts, they replaced it with one that is even stronger and much more dangerous. And they did a study, I believe it was in England, of cashiers who handle those receipts all the time, every day, a zillion times a day, and they measured the xenoestrogen in the urine of these cashiers before and after one shift. And the chemical doubled in one shift. The chemical in the urine, being excreted in the urine, doubled in one shift. So they're exposed to these xenoestrogens. I tell people to say, when I go to a store, I said, no, I don't need a receipt, it's okay. Or, could you put it in the bag for me? I'm old or something. But I don't touch them as much as possible. Touch them once, it's not going to be a big deal. Obviously, we handle these things all the time. But that's an unknown source of these foreign estrogens. Another one we know stimulates the bad estrogens is the chemical in Roundup, good old Monsanto, glyphosate. Now you see the commercials on TV. If you use glyphosate and got some form of cancer, then call these attorneys because it is a carcinogen. It says here, greater than 10,000 micrograms per liter, promoted proliferation of estrogen-dependent human breast cancer cells. Also increased the expression of estrogen response element, luciferase. Wow. A luciferase reporter gene, that's the one that is in lightning bugs also. So we know that that's the reason why one of the main reasons glyphosate or Roundup is so toxic is because it contains these chemicals that stimulate the estrogen receptors really badly and may be responsible for an increase in hormone-related cancers and other cancers. So the bottom line is, if you have non-GMO soy, which is harder and harder to find, thank you, Monsanto. If you have non-GMO soy, and you have that on a regular basis, if you're exposed to xenoestrogens and all of your estrogen receptors are blocked with the weakest estrogen receptor stimulator, then you'll block out the most dangerous ones, and it's highly protective. And there's a number of studies that show that non-GMO soy in Japan and other natural phytoestrogens help to block the dangerous ones out and then lower the risk. Now, after you get estrogens in your system, your liver has to process them. And there are some foods that will either block the breakdown of estrogens, which isn't good. It'll increase these estrogens in your system, or it'll facilitate the liver helping to metabolize your estrogens down to a normal, non-toxic form. And this is where we get into the discussion of grapefruit versus broccoli. Grapefruit is, you may have heard, you shouldn't take certain drugs like statin drugs with grapefruit because it blocks the metabolism of those drugs in the liver. And you may increase the level that's circulating around because the liver is not breaking them down. So there was a British medical journal study that said that women who ate a quarter grapefruit, or half a grapefruit a day, increased their risk of breast cancer by 33%. And that is because the grapefruit was blocking the breakdown, the normal breakdown of estrogen in the liver. So the estrogen levels build up, and that's not good for breast and other hormone-related cancers. On the other hand, broccoli, containing I3C, indole-3-carbinol, and also DIM, helps to metabolize estrogens down. So that's actually a good thing to take. Broccoli, eating broccoli, or taking the concentrates like we have in I3C, we have a DIM formula, helps to metabolize not only estrogens but also nicotine down to non-toxic forms. So eat broccoli, and I would avoid grapefruit for men and women because there's good evidence that these toxic estrogens are a big factor with prostate cancer in men. So give up grapefruit and grapefruit juice. Sorry about the citrus industry, but all other citrus is fine. Oranges, tangerines, everything else, limes and lemons, all those are fine. No problem at all. It's just grapefruit and grapefruit juice that could be the problem. Now, the other factor that we come into with this discussion is the condition called estrogen dominance, and that's where you have too much estrogen for the amount of progesterone, the natural progesterone. And again, if you get on any kind of a hormone, you want to make sure it is bioidentical or human identical, not synthetic. The human identical hormones, the bioidentical hormones, are metabolized a lot differently. And unfortunately, some doctors don't even have that awareness. Even some endocrinologists think that the progestins that they give, like Provera, are the same as natural bioidentical progesterone, and it is not. And the same goes for estrogens. So in the same book I read about from on the podcast I did, the one before last about mistletoe, by Dr. John R. Lee, MD, and he was the expert, he's passed now, in progesterone and estrogen dominance. So you can have normal, low, or high levels of estrogen, but virtually no progesterone, and still have estrogen dominance. So he goes through in alphabetical order, and this is alphabetical, not what is caused more or less. But these are the conditions that have been associated with estrogen dominance, having too much estrogen and not enough progesterone to balance it out, natural progesterone. Acceleration of the aging process. It starts with A and ends in Z. So acceleration of the aging process, allergy symptoms including asthma, hives, rashes, sinus congestion, autoimmune disorders like lupus, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and maybe Sjogren's, breast cancer, breast tenderness, fibrocystic breast, cervical dysplasia. We always think of a folic acid deficiency with that. So apparently too much estrogen and not enough natural progesterone also plays a role. Cold hands and feet is a symptom of thyroid dysfunction. If you have a relative progesterone deficiency, that may be affecting your thyroid. Too much copper can be caused by estrogen dominance. Decreased sex drive, because progesterone helps to increase libido. Depression with anxiety or agitation. Maybe it has a role with the blood sugar there. Dry eyes. Early onset of menstruation. Endometrial cancer, uterine cancer. Now, early onset of menstruation, I've got a friend who has a daughter in Colombia and lived in Colombia for most of her life. And she started menstruation, I think she said it was when she was like 15 or 16. She has another daughter, younger, here, and living in the States, being exposed to all these xenoestrogens. And she started her menstruation when she was, I think, just turning 12, maybe 11 and a half. So there's probably less environmental estrogens in other countries than there are here. I mentioned endometrial cancer, fat gain, especially around the abdomen, hips, and thighs, fatigue, fibrocystic breast, foggy thinking, gallbladder disease, hair loss, and the gallbladder disease. The number of women who are affected versus men with gallbladder problems or need a gallbladder removed and get gallstones is a big factor, and it seems like the estrogens are playing a role there. Hair loss, I mentioned, headaches, hypoglycemia, which may be responsible for some of these other symptoms, increased blood clotting, so you have an increased risk of stroke, infertility, especially when you have a progesterone deficiency. Many women have miscarriages when this ratio of estrogen to progesterone is too high, irregular menstrual cycles, irritability, insomnia, magnesium deficiency can be caused by this estrogen dominance, memory loss, mood swings, osteoporosis, not a Fosamax deficiency, not a Prolia deficiency, PMS, polycystic ovaries, and that's probably the influence that this has on the hypoglycemia and the increased insulin that causes the PCOS. Premenopausal bone loss, prostate cancer in men, sluggish metabolism, thyroid dysfunction, which mimic hypothyroidism, but it may be the relative progesterone deficiency, uterine cancer, uterine fibroids, water retention and bloating, and zinc deficiency can all be caused by this estrogen dominance. That's too much of any of those estrogens we mentioned before and not enough natural bioidentical progesterone. Dr. John Lee was a big proponent of saliva tests for hormone imbalances, and that's something that we do also. There's a couple, since I'm not a medical doctor, I can't recommend everything, but there are over-the-counter progesterone and DHEA that we can recommend if the tests show they are needed. These are hormones. You don't want to play around with hormones. I mean, some of these health food stores will give you, 50 milligrams of DHEA saying everybody needs it, and that's absolute craziness. And you shouldn't even mess around with progesterone cream because it works. Only when you test it and we know it's low should you maybe use a bioidentical natural progesterone cream to bring them back into balance and then do follow-up testing. So there's a lot that goes on in the hormones and a lot in bioidentical hormones that unfortunately physicians are not taught well. And I hope this began to explain that to you. John Lee's book, What Your Doctor May Not Tell You About Premenopause, is a very good source. Balance your hormones in your life from 30 to 50. And more information on our programs, the Body Chem program, where we can add on hormone tests to our basic Body Chem program, testing for chemical elements and mineral deficiencies, toxic metals, blood chemistry imbalances, and many people come to us for various different symptoms. The Body Chem program available. Give us a call, 1-800-CHEMIST for that, 1-800-243-6478. You can always check us out on the web at 1-800-CHEMIST.com. For Body Chemistry Associates and Health Connection Radio, this has been your host, Jay Foster. We'll be with you soon on another podcast.